From Microsoft, Jerry Roberts joins us. First, some supporters to thank, and thank you for listening. This episode is supported by CCW Digital, leaders responsible for operations, information technology, contact centers, customer care, service, and support are invited to register for a free CCW Digital membership. Membership includes networking with 100,000 plus qualified industry professionals, quarterly executive research reports, product matchmaking, and more. Go to ccwdigital.com to join the community. This episode is also supported by the CCW Conference and Expo. The event will empower you to test, learn, and try the next big thing in customer experience optimization. Are you interested in mining data across touch points for personalized and predictive data? Are you trying to integrate your systems to get a more complete view of the customer? Are you figuring out what innovations to invest in? Chatbots, virtual assistants, AI, VR, biometrics, to name a few? Go to callcenterweek.com to register. Jerry Roberts joins us and discusses his history in retail, which is really the recent history of the retail industry. He spent time at Radio Shack and Walden Books and Borders, going from specialty retail to big box retail in its early heyday. Radio Shack was his first real P&L, giving him great business training. There was a tremendous amount of change at Walden Books, teaching him change management, which now comes second nature to him. As the merger with Borders was going through, he moved to an ultimate big box at the time, Circuit City, and then just as quickly moved back to specialty retail with Sunglass Hut. Eventually he moved to Apple Retail, working under Ron Johnson, and eventually to his current position with Microsoft, where he's focused on truly experiential retail. Welcome to CCW Digital on B2B IQ. I'm your host, Seth Adler. Download episodes on ccwdigital.com or through our app in iTunes, within the iTunes podcast app, in Google Play, or wherever you currently get your podcasts. From Microsoft, Jerry Roberts.
I already asked you if you're related to Eric Roberts.
I am not,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Or his sister.
Yeah, his more famous sister.
Well, don't tell him that.
Exactly, true.
Where are you from originally?
Originally, I'm from St. Louis. Grew up there and went to school in Missouri.
We talked about the fact that you're an old Cardinals fan. I'm an old Mets fan. And back in the day when the Cardinals were in the National League East,
Yes,
this was an issue.
exactly.
You know.
Pond scum issue.
Indeed. That's what they, the wonderful, Midwestern, nice St. Louis people called not only the team, but the fans.
That's right. That's right. I remember that well.
Yeah. And so as a little kid, I didn't quite understand it, but I realized that that maybe New York had some critics.
And then Keith Hernandez became one of the most hated ex-Cardinals by going to the Mets.
Well, but he was traded, in fairness to him.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
But he did have some success with
did.
With my New York Mets. I was going to say your New York Mets, but
No,
it
you're
wasn't
right.
that.
You're right.
And we can go around and name who played each position for each team, but we're
Right.
not here to do that,
Okay.
Jerry. Right? But that's where you have love from. But you really consider yourself a Coloradan. Is that fair?
Yeah, I have moved around a lot. So just to sign off on the sports thing,
Yeah.
so I'm a Cardinal baseball fan,
There
a
we go.
Blues hockey fan, a
Okay.
Denver Bronco fan, and a Cleveland Cavalier fan. So go figure that out.
I don't. The Cleveland. Well, that's Ohio. That's later, I guess.
There you go, yep.
And I would imagine LeBron helped that.
Yeah, it's easy.
You don't seem like much of a Brad Daugherty fan.
Exactly. And the Nuggets, not much to write home about.
No, not anymore. Not
Right.
anymore. All right. So I'm glad that we talked about that. Your job, I was talking to your colleague who Microsoft isn't perceived as a retailer.
Right.
But of course you are.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So can you just kind of take us through your job and how it works, and
Yeah.
then we'll kind of work backwards. How about that?
Yeah. I'll start with Microsoft.
Fair enough.
So I had a background, another retailer that I'll fill in a minute.
Fair
but
enough.
when I started with Microsoft, it was prior to retail stores, and
Yeah.
and kind of the journey has been that Microsoft had tried retail a few times and abandoned it.
Yep.
And said, yeah, it's not for us. So when I got there, this was about 10 years after Apple stores had started. So 2009-ish.
Yeah.
And Microsoft said, we have to have retail stores. We're losing in the consumer mind share, if nothing else. They still
Sure.
had tons and tons of enterprise sales and business and all that, but we're not seen as the cool, hip kid on the block. So that's kind of what retail stores were started for. And we started them at a time when Microsoft had Windows 6, I think it was, phone. It was Windows Vista was we were still working on.
Okay.
Xbox was kind of, long in the tooth at that point. And so we opened these stores, and if you've been to them, you've seen them. They're big, beautiful. The video wall is a great thing. We had Surface. So we had a lot of great experiences going on our store because
Immersive experiences.
Exactly. Yeah,
right?
exactly. There were things there that really got you to stay in the store a long time, and we had a lot of fun. And so we really were, I like to think, kind of out of necessity, we were pioneers in the experiential retail, space. We didn't have, again, we were trying to prove to customers we were relevant, we were cool, and we were here for the long haul.
There we go.
We wanted to win them back. So that's how it started.
Yeah.
Over time, very slow progression. We have, got some great products. We just released a new product today, Surface Pro. So a lot of great things happening with our product line that have now, now we've got these stores and people can come in, see, touch, feel, and experience all of the Microsoft ecosystem.
Yeah, and in my lifetime, I've had a relationship with Microsoft nearly the entire time.
Right.
And what I've started to notice, you'll be happy to hear, Jerry, is that I'm starting to notice a lot more Microsoft product
Right.
around.
Right.
There are surfaces in the planes.
Right.
There are,
Right.
and especially, great job with NFL and all that.
Right.
You guys have turned the corner, it does feel like.
Yeah.
Whereas you had mentioned a moment in time where we tried retail and it didn't
Sure.
kind of work, but now it feels different. Why do you think it feels different to me, the consumer?
I think honestly, retail. I'll tell you a little more about my background.
Yeah, sure.
I was at Apple Retail for 7.5 years
Oh, okay.
prior to Microsoft.
But so was Ron Johnson.
Very true.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In other words, J.C. Penney and him, that
Very
didn't
true.
work out. So
Very true.
That's not a silver bullet, so to speak.
I'll say this. I think, in my opinion, we absolutely have. What our challenge was as a retail store is to put the face of Microsoft to the public because until we had retail stores, Microsoft was someplace else in Seattle and Redmond, and you really didn't have a lot of interaction with Microsoft, the company, or the people that represented the company. It was through somebody else, which all those retailers did a great job.
Sure.
But it wasn't Microsoft, and that's not that unlike what Apple went through back in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Sure.
Was they really wanted to put their face on their products. So I think that's a large part of it, is putting that customer-facing, retail salesperson with a product in their hand, and it's allowed us to get direct feedback to Microsoft to tailor those products to what a customer is looking for. And if you go back to 2009 when we started these stores, if you had Store A was 2009 Microsoft and Store B was 2017 Microsoft, it'll be the same box.
Sure.
But the stuff inside it has changed so much, and it's really been response to what our customers have asked us for. So
There we
that's
go.
been a lot of fun.
There we go. All right, so now you've kind of cited your career a couple times. Let's make sure that we hit those marks. Where'd you go to school, though?
Central Missouri, outside of Kansas City, so that was kind of tough being from St. Louis. I still remember the '85 series well, and the guy was safe at home in that Game 6. Just one more sports reference.
Yeah,
there,
you're
but,
talking about the Cardinals versus the Royals. The Royals win the series,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I
Stolen World Series. Yeah.
So then you go into enemy territory,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
To go to school. What was
Yeah.
your major?
Business and education both. Actually, a double major in business and education.
Did you think you were going to be
I did.
an educator?
I did, and then realized my wife is now a teacher, and thank goodness we're both not teachers, or it would be a different story of all that moving probably wouldn't have happened.
I
So,
see.
yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Meaning, thank goodness she is a teacher. Thank
Yes.
goodness you are not a teacher. Is
Exactly,
what
yeah,
we're saying.
yeah,
Fair
exactly.
enough. And so then, right out of that, where did you land? You figured it wasn't going to be education. And
Yeah, I worked part-time retail in college.
Okay.
And I've said this before, kind of like The Godfather. Every time you try to get out, they suck you back in. I also probably a little more complimentary way to say that is, you're good enough at it, you kind of keep getting back into it. So part-time, very old retailer in college, pre-Walmart. It was called TG&Y.
Okay.
Discount retailer. Worked a couple of years there.
Yeah.
Went to Radio Shack for a little bit.
There you go.
Which was, my first electronics retailer. Spent about eight and a half years at Walden Books and Borders during their heyday with superstores and all that.
Well, let's stop there,
Sure.
right? Because on the store floor, that's one experience, and we can recall that maybe later.
Sure.
And as far as Radio Shack is
Yeah,
concerned,
yeah.
before you go into Borders, because Borders, the years that you're talking about, Borders was huge.
Right,
It
right.
was explosive growth. It was amazing.
Right.
They were everywhere.
Right.
What did you take from Radio Shack to Borders? What were the lessons from those, years at Radio Shack?
It's interesting you say that because as we talk, there's a few points in my career. There have been some really great retailers. A couple of them are here today still. But with Radio Shack, honestly, I was very young, but it was my first real P&L, and they did a great job with it back in those days. It was very much about, I can remember every month you'd talk to your district manager about you're open to buy. So you actually selected the products you were going to buy to support the advertising that was coming out. And the way you earned that was if you sold enough of we called them parts and pieces, if you remember Radio Shack in those days. Resistors and things that I had no idea what they did, but we sold a lot of them.
Resistors, transistors, and everything in between?
Those were the things that, paid the bills with the margin, and then you could sell the big stereos, and sold my first cell phone on the last day I worked at Radio Shack. So
look at that.
It was that was a huge business training for me, and it was not something that I really had that kind of exposure to again until many years later.
So they really did give you a lot of kind of, P&L, but a creativity within that P&L.
Absolutely, and it was a very small box, obviously, specialty retailer, 2 or 3 or 4 employees, so you did a little bit of everything. So it was a great training ground, and I look on it fondly. Would I still want to be doing that? No, sure thing, but it was a great training, absolutely.
So here we go to Walden Books and Borders, and at what point did you get there? Were they already kind of acting like what we came to understand, which was we're going to buy everything, we're going to be everywhere?
My start there, it was when Walden was big. So Borders really wasn't big yet. Barnes & Noble hadn't really started opening their superstores just yet. About halfway through my career there, that's when that took off. But my first few years there, Walden, you might remember this period when a lot of retailers were doing there would be Gap on one side, Gap Kids on the other, limited and limited to men's and women's. So we had, at the time I started there, we had the Walden bookstore, and right connected on the inside was Walden Kids, books, toys, and all that kind of thing. So there was a lot of change there. And what I will tell people about my career is you hear a lot in periods like we're having today about change management and managing through change and living through that and getting people to buy into changing. My entire career has been about change. I started at Walden with a new division, then moved back into the the bigger division. Then I went to the superstore division. So my whole career has been based on change. So that comes second nature to me. Which has been great. So that's kind of, you'll hear that theme throughout my career pretty much.
Okay, fair enough. And it's almost like you don't have to try in that area. That's all you know.
It's great because I can help others. Say, hey, you know what? We'll be okay. Change is okay. It's going to be fine.
This was the onset of the superstore. This was the onset of Big Box. Explain to folks that now see the sunset of Big Box how this could have happened.
Well, it's funny because I was at Walden, like I said, 8.5 years. I left Walden as after the merger with Borders had gone through, and they were moving the corporate office from Stamford, Connecticut to Ann Arbor, Michigan. At that time, I decided I wanted to move back to Colorado for the second time. And landed with, and by the way, this is when Big Box malls were going to die. This was the first death of malls. They were all going to die because Big Box was taking over the world. So I landed with Circuit City, Big Box, right?
Absolutely.
And they were just expanding to Colorado. I jumped in there, thought that'd be a great experience for me since Big Box was the thing. Was there about a year, and landed with Musicland Superstores, another old one. Musicland had a superstore called Media Play, had many stores throughout the country. And, so I was there as their multi-unit in Colorado, Oklahoma, those kind of places. And that was the death knell for malls at that time. So sure enough, a few years later, fast forward, malls don't die. I decided I wanted to try something a little bit different. And Sunglass Hut came calling, just said, hey, we've got a great market. It's Aspen, Vail, Breckenridge, Steamboat.
Sounds terrible.
Some of Denver. Yeah, it was awful. And they had a great district for me. So, as you know, one of my friends here is with Sunglass Hut. And I will tell you, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of your question, but
that's fine.
We mentioned earlier the training ground at Radio Shack, and I still use this a lot. Sunglass Hut does what they do very well. They know what they are. They measure it, they repeat it, they do it over and over. So they've done a very good job. That was another place. I was there 3 years, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I worked for them in Denver, moved to Chicago for a while. And it's been a great experience. So that was a big learning too. But that was, that did not spell the death of malls. They came back and thrived again for another 20 years or so.
That's it. So, before we prescribe something, let's kind of wait and see a little bit. And we're at CX Exchange for Retail, and it is around lunchtime, so you'll hear that in the background. just getting back to that big box customer,
Yes.
because you did work with the big box customer,
Sure.
you know, in a couple of different ways. What were you hearing, right, from them at the time? Why was this the way to
Yeah.
go to just explode out the footprint?
Yeah, it was all about selection. Customers wanted everything at their fingertips and wanted instant gratification. Sounds familiar, to today.
It
Just
does.
a better format. So at the times, particularly with the Borders, Circuit City came a little later, but with Borders
Yeah.
and Barnes and Noble, and even music, the media play stores were books, music, video, and software. So it was everything under one roof.
That's when
that
we
was
used to
it.
buy CDs.
Exactly.
You might
yeah,
remember.
Exactly. Yeah, CDs, a few cassette tapes.
Sure.
But yeah, that's what it was about. It was about selection and instant gratification.
So essentially, if I put myself in the Wayback Machine, before e-commerce got going to a place that was truly functional for the consumer, the big box retailer filled that void.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Again, that's the selection all under one roof, instant gratification, all same thing you can apply to e-commerce today, and next day, same day delivery, I should say.
So thank goodness that right at the right time you get out of big box and you get to specialty
Right.
with Sunglass Hut. What were you able to, if anything, bring from your big box experiences, right, to that specialty retailer?
It's interesting. You wouldn't think there'd be a lot. I mean,
Right.
I went from kind of medium size to jumbo, then to super tiny, kiosk in a mall.
Yeah.
But Sunglass Hut, if in that space, they have the selection, they have the range, they have the price still today. And I'm still a fan and still shop there.
Sure.
So in a way, it was very similar. Now, what I think if you can take from Sunglass Hut to apply to today's world, experts in the category. I mean, you can't find better product knowledge on sunglasses anywhere else. They know their stuff, they know what they do, and they do it very well. And I think that can be applied. Apple, Microsoft, any
Sure.
retailer today.
Sure.
You talk to anybody that's at this customer experience exchange, and it's about arm your team with the most knowledge they can have. And I think in a microcosm, Sunglass Hut is a great example of a team that does that.
So let me ask you a tough question. I
Sure.
feel like it's far enough away that we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
How come that's working, Sunglass Hut? How come now Microsoft Store's working?
Yeah.
Whereas Radio Shack hasn't,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about a smaller footprint. We're talking about specialty.
Yeah.
What doesn't work there that does work here? What's the missing piece?
I think it's, again, this is my opinion.
Sure,
So
of course.
I think it's a little bit about identity. I think that, my opinion of Radio Shack over the years, you certainly could buy that stuff anywhere. So why go to a Radio Shack? When I was there at Radio Shack a long time ago,
Yeah.
8,000 locations. They were everywhere. You couldn't, you trip and fall, and you're in a Radio Shack. And that was a big selling point. They were everywhere you needed to be. So fast forward to many years later, I think they kind of lost their identity. They didn't really know who they were. They were trying to be everybody to everything in a very small space, trying
Yeah.
to compete with the big box. And I think today what you see a lot of is every manufacturer wants to have that front contact with
Yep.
someone, and I'm not sure that was being delivered in a great way there.
I think the other piece of that, as a consumer in this conversation,
Right.
is expertise.
Yeah.
So I remember going to Radio Shack as a kid,
Right.
and the guy in the store
Sure.
knew everything. Not because I was a kid.
Right,
I
right,
remember
right.
that he knew stuff.
Right. Right.
And it was probably he
Yeah.
at the time.
Right.
Fast forward to maybe, let's even say 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
5 years ago, I would go into a Radio Shack. That expertise seemed to have left.
Yeah.
So whether it's big box, whether it's specialty, you've been working with guys on the floor. You've been a guy on the
Right,
floor.
right.
Talk about expertise of the associate, how important that is, and how really to get that expertise there.
Yeah, we really, in all of my career, we really immerse people in the product. I mean, it's one of the reasons I love what I do. I love Microsoft products. I loved Apple products when I was there. It is about the product, and I love sunglasses when I was there. So you want to find a team and build a team that you can say, hey, I want you to love these products individually. We talk all the time about, make it personal. What do you do with the product? What do you do with your laptop? What do you do with your sunglasses? What do you like about them? And really keeping it personal, because that's what customers relate to. They don't want to know the canned speech about, hey, it does this, it does that.
Right.
Tell me how you use it. How's it going to make my life better?
Yeah.
That's what we talk about a lot. And I think we in the technology space, there are a lot of fans of all products, right?
Sure.
and people get pretty passionate about it, and I think that comes through. And what my job is to arm my team with the best experience they can have, so that they can enjoy the products, and then take that out to the customers. I think it translates that way.
There you go. All right, so there's one more big piece that we haven't talked about. Did you go direct from Sunglass Hut to Apple?
I did, and it's a personal relationship. The guy that recruited me to Sunglass Hut recruited me to Apple.
All right.
So, because quite honestly, had never used a Mac at that time.
That's fair. Do you use one now, I wonder?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not.
Yeah, exactly. So as far as there, okay, now we're at Apple, right? And so for any marketer listening, which is most people, that's a go-to example of a beacon of light from a hill.
Right.
They didn't know necessarily retail when you got there. What year did you get there? What year did they roll out retail?
I opened the first store.
There we go.
Glendale, California.
What did they know already that surprised you as a lifer in retail?
Well, I'd have to say in retrospect.
Okay.
I didn't know any of this going in. I knew that they wanted open stores and they'd hired me. That was pretty much it.
Which is good enough for you, right?
And several people like me, right?
Yeah.
So our job. Here's what I found out in retrospect.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs knew what he wanted to do. He worked with Ron Johnson very closely. They had a plan, and they knew what they were trying to achieve. And certainly there were some things that developed along the way, but that was really what it was about. They knew what they wanted to do. They said, look, we're not getting the face of Apple out there, if you will.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get that out there. And so over time they did that. Then came an iPod for iPod, then an iPod for Windows, and then all that kind of thing. So the rest is kind of in the history books. But it's been an amazing record for them, and I was glad to be a part of the early stages.
So I brought up Ron to begin with. You brought him up just now.
Yeah.
What dots didn't connect, do you think? Just knowing, I don't know how closely you worked with him.
Yeah. Very.
Okay.
Yeah.
What dots do you think didn't connect as far as JCPenney, which is a tough brand, having its own, tough experience with him, without him?
Sure.
What didn't work from the Apple mindset to the JCP mindset?
Probably a lot smarter people than me have pondered that question, but
Sure.
I'm not sure. It may have been ahead of its time. Is about the only thing I can say, because if you look at a Best Buy right now, it's not unlike what I perceived that Ron was trying to do at JCPenney, having that direct interaction with the kind of a manufacturer inside a building, right? So Best Buy is being very successful with that right now.
Right.
So and then there was also, I think, the change from what the JCPenney customer wanted at the time, and it was a stark change management. Maybe they didn't jump on board that quickly. So I know JCPenney's doing great again now. It seems like they're really moving in the right direction, and you hear a lot of great things about them. But my only conclusion has ever been that it maybe was a little bit ahead of its time, and then maybe that change management piece. I don't know how you do that, necessarily with a big monster like that. But
what might you share additionally about Ron? Because who does get a tough, everybody likes to tear it down when you can, right?
I'll share a piece of advice he gave me, and if he ever hears this, I hope he remembers it.
There you go.
Ron was one of the most instrumental people in my career. I had interviewed for a director level position a couple of times. I think it was 2, and I hadn't gotten it. Took the feedback once, took the second time, and after the second time, I was close enough with Ron that I said, "Hey, I'm struggling. What's happening here?" So Ron gave me the advice. He said, "Jerry, and his advice I had never heard before. He said, Jerry, there are a lot of great leaders, but there are even less great leaders who also get results." And I, at the time, I was pretty good. I mean, I kind of ran a good box and knew what I was doing and had respect and all that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't really top of my game, in any given category. So I took that to heart and kind of really looked inward and said, you know what, I've got to get the results too. I was doing okay.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, blazing any trails. So.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, it's kind of that kicked me into high gear, and within a year I was back on that interview, and I got to that director level, and I've kind of never looked back, and I've always remembered that feedback. So Ron's a genuinely great guy. Still, I don't talk to him that often, obviously.
Sure.
He's a busy guy, but he never fails to pick up the phone when I do call him or answer an email, and so I have a ton of gratitude and respect for him.
So, and if I'm hearing you right, the lesson there was, you're doing fine.
Yeah.
If you keep on going like this, you're fine.
Yeah.
I don't see excellence, and I could see excellence in you.
Good to great.
Yeah.
Yeah, good to great.
Amazing.
So, and I've tried to pass that on every opportunity I get. I try to, pay it forward or pay it back or however you want to say it. But that's kind of one of the things I take pride in myself. I don't know if this is one of the questions you have coming, but
Sure.
my job really is to make the people that work at Microsoft. I always tell them, I want this to be, no matter what you go on and do, if you become a doctor, whatever, president, whatever, I hope you look back and say, one of the best jobs I ever had was working at Microsoft Retail.
Well, that's people, people obviously stay at jobs for a manager. They also leave jobs because of a manager.
Exactly.
And then just one more piece on Ron, because I feel like we owe it to him.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And I think we even have said it here. It sounds like it was a speed issue. In other words, culture plus speed,
Right.
Equals this isn't going to work. Meaning, there was such a big bridge to kind of go from
Right.
Apple to JCPenney.
Right.
And then also, we're going to move this quickly.
Right.
On top of
Right.
the difference in change in culture.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a big
It is.
ship to change in culture and then also in speed.
Sure. I think to your point, you're also changing two groups. You had the internal group,
Yeah.
which is like, what are we doing?
Right.
And then you had the external group, which is, what are you doing? You know, I'm used to coupons and that kind of thing. So I think it was, maybe it was a clash of two things that were very difficult to move and manage through change and all that. Even one of those would be a big undertaking. So maybe two was just more than it was time for.
That's it. And that, I think, is why we're starting to see that chief customer officer,
Right.
chief customer experience officer,
Right.
become chief experience officer,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
have the internal and the external because
Absolutely.
it's all the same kind of experience.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I agree.
All right, so I got three final questions
Sure.
for you. I'll tell you what they are, and then I'll ask you them in order.
Okay.
What has most surprised you at work along the way? What has most surprised you in life? And then on the soundtrack of your life, one track, one song that's got to be on there. But first things first.
Okay.
Along the way here,
Okay.
what has most surprised you at work?
How much I always thought I knew.
Yeah.
And every year I realized I didn't know anything. I'll probably say, I keep hoping one of these years I'll say, I figured it out at this point or this point or this point. But every year I learn more about better things I should do, better things I should have done, better ways to take care of people, and just, better balance and those kind of things. So.
Yeah. I keep saying I am getting better at knowing what to do, yet somehow I'm getting dumber.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
What's most surprised you in life?
It's not that dissimilar to that. Probably that. Well, this is almost. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I have learned both. Right. I've learned from. I've taken things from my personal life to my business life, and business life to personal life. And I'll say, it surprises me how bad I am at both, and still manage to be a success, I guess.
Right.
The bar is pretty low, maybe. I don't know. My wife should get a lot of credit, and the people that work for me and with me should get a lot of credit.
And I think it's that acknowledgement that has both groups sticking with you, if that makes sense.
Well, let's hope I can keep it going for a little while longer.
Well, in other words, you're saying I'm not doing it perfectly, but I'm trying my tail off, right?
Far from it. And when you look at point A to point B, it's been a long journey, but like I said, I'm very grateful for both sides.
There we go. Soundtrack of your life, one track, one song that's going to be
well,
on
the first one that popped into my mind, it's probably obscure unless you're my age or something like that. So there's On Exile on Main Street.
Of course.
Best album of all time.
Without question.
Shine a Light.
Oh.
So that's my song.
Jerry, you win that lottery without question.
Excellent.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep trucking.
All right, thanks very much.
And there you have Jerry Roberts. Really great representative of the retail industry. He has been through a lot of changes. Very interesting to hear his personal anecdotes involving Ron Johnson. Good to kind of get a sense of who that person is as opposed to what you may have read. Thanks for listening and stay tuned.